very much confused about the date key and loading that into the fact table.
All right. Yeah, I can explain that. That's a good question, actually. So let's take this as date dimension. Okay, and I'll explain that in details.
Good. Can you take a few minutes to explain for me about lookup transformation? I couldn't figure out.
Okay, sure. So what I'm trying to do is, I have this store procedure, but somehow the table was dropped. So I'm trying to figure out a way to create this table, okay? So just give me 1 second. So just to give you a very high level introduction on this date dimension, right? So the purpose of creating your data warehouse is keep your historical data, right? So why we create the data warehouse is to store historical data. It could be last 20 years, it could be last 15 years, or it could be from the inception date of that given business unit that you are working for, right? So whenever the company is established from that time to the current date. So the idea is to keep building that data repository, right? So you continue to store the data in the warehouse so that as you move forward, you can do a lot of historical data analysis for your business decision making. And you can also do, depending on the nature of data, you can also do forecasts, right? So based on, let's say if you have last 20 years data, 10 years data, based on those trends, you can do actually different kind of forecasts. Now, to be able to do forecasts, there are going to be other things that you need to know, the dependent variable, independent variable, and then what kind of algorithm you're going to do. And then you need to know some of the statistical concept as well. But the key element is going to be your historical data, right? So if you don't have, last 10 years data or 20 years data, you won't be able to do those kind of analysis, because the more you have the varieties in your data, more your forecast is going to be accurate, right? Just think about that. If you have data for last 5 years, there will be a trend. Then you might have data for 15 years. There will be another kind of trend, because it's definitely more volume. So more you can feed the data into the model, you will see perfect or close to perfect result from the forecast. Now that's a separate discussion. Now, in terms of storing this historical data, one of the main key elements that you will need is the date, right? That's how you can say your data is historical, right? Otherwise, there is no other way you can identify something that says it's historical, right? So if you say this is from past, when, right? When you say when, that means there should be a date. So if I say I had my sales declined last year, when? Last year, January, last year, February, 10 years ago today, what date? So as you can see, everything is going to be tied with some sort of date. Now, what date format, that doesn't matter. You can do any date formats, right? It could be, something like you have a field, something like year, month, and then date, right? You can have year, and then month and date. You can also go other way, like date, month, and year. So there are like different ways of storing this date column. It's nothing but just the date column. You can specify any format you want. Now, but the main important piece, in any given warehouse, you will not find a single data warehouse where you don't have a date dimension. Now, people might call it in different name. For example, here we're calling as dim calendar day. They might say just, something like dim date, right? They can say date dimension, Now, this is just a table name, right? There could be any kind of naming convention, but the concept and the purpose is same. So the concept, I'm going to come to the concept in a second, but the purpose you already understand is to keep the history. Now, why we are creating a separate date dimension rather just storing everything in a fact table? That's the question, right? So why we are creating a separate date dimension? There are tons of different reasons. One of the main reasons I would say is date is an attribute. If you think about product is an attribute, if you think about customer is an attribute, or if you think about your student, for example, is an attribute as well. So when I say attribute, I would say entity, sorry, I take that back, is an entity. And then entity will have a lot of relevant attribute. So if I say product is an entity, so you can explain a product in many different ways. So you can say a product has color, a product has size, a product has its category, a product has its prices, and all this, right? So if you think about any kind of entity, so student, for example, an entity, student has a name, student has a class, student has a, again, based on the gender, that student has a specific gender that student belongs to. Now, if you think about date is an entity, date also has different parts. For example, you have a date, what is today's date? What is the month that date belongs to? What is the quarter that date belongs to, right? And what is the day of the month on that given date? So if you think about today's date, which is 6/13/2022, you can actually find few attributes in that today's date itself. So you can say first thing is we're in second quarter. This is the 13th day of the month. This is month of June, and this is the year is 2022. So these are all relevant attribute to the date entity. Now you come into this question, why we are creating a separate date dimension. So think about this. You have a fact table. So I'm just going to come up with just some hypothetical fact table. Okay. So think about that. You have I'm going to create a table or maybe let's see if I have any table. So I'm going to say fact sets. Now, in this table, I'm going to create, I don't have relevant dimensions yet because only table I have, I don't have product dimension, I don't have all this, but I'm just going to keep some hypothetical column as well. So I'm going to say, this is my product key, integer value. This is going to be my customer key. And this is going to be my geography or location key. And this is going to be my date key. Now, next, I'm going to add few columns like, total sales. Keep it as like float as data type. I'm going to say, let's say something, total inventory let's keep it as a float as well. And then quantity sold. Again, these are just hypothetical field names I'm giving. And then I'm going to just say insert date in the table, just because you want to keep track when this table was loaded. And I'm just going to say this is a date time column, and this is going to be a default to get date. That way I don't have to populate this table, populate this column. Now in this product key, it says it's expecting something over here. Product key cells.
Create table.
Yeah. So now this is good. So here I'm going to add something, date key integer, and then I'm going to add a constraint, okay, foreign key constraint, because I need to relate this fact table and dimension table together. All right. So there's a syntax you can do. So let's say this is a foreign key, which is going to reference to another table, which is, this is the table name. I'm just going to copy that. References to this table, and then you have to mention the column name, which column. So it has a column day key, right? So you can say day key, date key is the same thing. This is where it is referencing to. All right, so if the syntax is correct, let's run this query. And it says it's not the same data type referencing. Okay, so if you go back to the table that we created, day key, let's try to look at the, okay, so if you look at the table name, calendar day, the data type is varchar. So it should not be varchar, it should be integer. We can create it as an integer, but in that case, let me look at the store procedure real quick. Okay, so look at the data real quick as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is real quick, I'm going to change this to varchar to match the data type with the referencing table, just to quickly go over. Okay, now I might have to drop this table because we already created once. Okay, so did not create last time. So now let's try to do that again. It's not the same length. All right, so now it's complaining about length. So it's 50. So here, let's make it to 50. Let's try to do it again. Okay, so this is successful. Now let's go and refresh this table, list of tables. So I can see there should be a fact table created, fact cells. All right, now here you will see the date key here is a foreign key, which is referencing as a constraint in this table. And there is no primary key in this table, as because we don't need one in the fact table. The fact table does not have to have any primary key unless you are creating any composite primary key. Okay, so that's not needed. Now this table is created. So what we are going to do also, we need to probably store some data. Okay, so I'm going to do one thing here is so this table definitely empty. So I'm going to say insert into this table and let's try to get some data. Okay, so product key is going to be, let's say 10. Again, we don't have any dimension table related to those. So because we just didn't create one, we don't have time in the class to cover that. So customer key, let's say 12. Location key is 50, and then date key. So date key is going to be the actual date format, the date in integer format. So what we're going to store is, let's say today's date is as 06/13/2022. And then we have total sale, I'm going to say, let's say $100. And then you have total inventory in terms of quantity, let's say 500. Quantity sold is let's say quantity sold 150. And then, yeah, that's it. So let's try to insert this first row. And it says something is not right. So number of column is different because we have this insert date as a default. So we also have to make, provide those column names here. That way it's not going to complain if you are leaving one column behind. So date key, and then you have total sales. And then you have total inventory and quantity sold. So that should take care of this. And it says insert statement conflict because the date key. Okay. So also we would like to check to see select star from your date table. Okay, we have this already. I want to check the date format. So here, this is the important piece. So you're trying to insert, if you look at the, let's first take a look at the error message, okay? So it says insert statement conflicted with foreign key. This is the foreign key name. And then the conflict occurred in database, and this is the table name and the column. So if you read this error message, what it is saying is, if you understand the referential integrity, that means if you have something that you are trying to insert into a fact table, and that table has a foreign key, which is referencing to a dimension table, which has a primary key. So you have to, the field that the value that you are trying to insert, that specific value should be available in your referencing dimension table. So let's take another simple example. So if you have a store and you sell all types of fruits, right? Let's say you have a fruit store. And I'm a customer and I'm saying, I want to buy mango from your store. And if you have mango, then you can sell it to me, right? If you don't have mango in your store, you won't be able to sell it to me, right? So that means if you try to relate this to a table structure, you have a fact table that you are trying to insert. Think about that's your customer. And then you have a dimension table, which has a primary key. Think about that's your store. You're trying to insert data into a fact table, and you're saying these two tables are related using the primary key and foreign key. Relationship is there. Now you can only create a relationship if both of the entity is available in both tables. So that means you would be only able to sell mango if that mango is available in your store to a customer. Pretty straightforward, simple example. Okay. So if you understand this concept, you will never forget referential integrity. This is a very common interview question as well. So the record that you are trying to insert into a foreign key table that has a foreign key, that specific record should exist in your primary key table. In this case, date, calendar date table. In this case, the fact table that we're trying to insert is the fact sales. Now, it is complaining about the structure, right? So if you look at the data that I'm trying to insert here, the format is month, date, and year. If you look at the table that we have is slightly different. It has year, month, and date. So if I switch this format to a little bit different way, so let's try to do this. So you have year, and then you have month, and you have date. So now let's try to insert this row. Now that is inserted. Now let's try to look at the table, your fact table. And this is one row in your table. So I'm going to insert probably in a few more rows.
I have a question, Abdullah.
Yes, go ahead.
So on the fact cell table, you put data key. That's the cell date, but you just reformat it to look the same data key.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you can have this. This can be a sales date. This can be, so for example purpose, I just added a date key, right? So it could be, you can name this as, sale date, for example. That's a good question also. So date key might not be like that always as date key as the name itself. It can be, sales date key. It can be, order date key, something like that. So that way you reference it to backend.
And this is the actual date when the sale is happening, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, what my understanding is now, so we have to use the convert statement for, like, we have the created date or whatever dates we have. We can use the convert statement and as a pattern for the date key, and then load the fact table. That's
Right.
what.
Yeah. So the key you are going to change into, technically you can do either in worker or integer format, but it has to have like this format, not like, something like I was showing. You should not be doing a key in this format with the dashes in between.
Okay. So basically, because other dimension tables have the surrogate key and it is coming directly. But I was confused because I was finding that the pattern is different. Then how can we load the same date? Like, why we are loading the date key, which does not relate to our sales date or whatever data we
Yeah,
have.
so you have to convert and then try to match with that convert style. So you might have in your source data, you might have this date in this format, for example, 2022/06/13. Now how you tie it back together, that's where you relate with your dim date table, where you are going to look up in the, so technically, what you could do in your calendar date table, you can actually add one more field like this. I would probably do that. So here you see you have calendar date, and then you could just say, let's do that. Actually, that would be a good practice. So I'm going to alter this table, and I'm going to add a field. Actually, it's better to drop and recreate. Okay, that way we keep the same format. So I'm going to also change this day key, make it to date key, since we're touching this table, and make it an integer. And also I'm going to say date format, or just say date. I'm just going to keep it as date. And then this is going to be a date data type. And then I'm going to keep everything else as same. I'm going to, if not exist, so I'm going to drop this table and then recreate. Then I might have to alter that. Okay, so it says reference by foreign key. So I'm going to also create a all right, so I'm going to drop this table as well. And then go back here. where did that go? Yeah, drop this, and now I'm going to recreate this table. Okay, now I have to actually go back and modify that store procedure real quick, because now I have one more field here, date, that needs to be populated as well. And also I have to change the data type. I don't want this to be varchar. I want this to be, cast this as int. And then one more field here, date. So this is start date is date time. So I'm going to here add this start date, and here I'm going to cast this as date, and I'm going to just keep it like that. All right, so now this should take care of my changes. So I'm going to alter this and then try to, okay, it's an invalid column day key. Oh, all right, so let's, here that should be date key, because we changed that column in the table, right? So yeah, so it's completed. Let's run this. So here, if I go back to my other query now, I should see no data here, and I should see date column added. So I'm going to call this procedure real quick, and that should populate my table here. So now I can see the date format is created. Date key is here, and I should also go back and recreate my fact table. So this time I'm going to create this fact table with integer data type. And okay, so I just need to run this part. Okay, the invalid date key. So it's going to be, yeah, date key. So if you change in one place, you see how many places you have to touch. So this is always, okay, it's already an object in the database. So let's drop, try to recreate. All right, so this is good. So I'm going to close this. No need that one anymore. Store procedure is completed. Now going back to the example that I was showing is, now let's take a look into my fact sales table is empty, right? Now, if you look at the team calendar date now one more time, is now I have this date column. So think about if you had like your sales table, the sales date, but the format is this way, right? Now, how do you convert that into an integer? That way you can tie it back with the key, right? So you need to have the date key. So the way you can do is easily you can do a lookup with this date column with your sales date in the table, and then you can get the associated date key, which is going to be stored into your fact table. Simple as that, right? So now when I'm going to explain the lookup transformation somebody asked, I can use this column actually for that example purpose, okay? So just hold on to that for real quick. So I'm going to add few more rows in this table. Now this time I have to change real quick. We have this fact cells. I have this location, date, and etc. So the format I changed last time should still be okay, but I can check whatever the format is in there is year, month, and date. So should be okay.
You
And I'm
can
going
also,
to data.
Abdullah, can also use the date field to link with the cell, with the fact cell. Like now you use data key, right? In the dimension date to link with the fact cell. Can you use, you can't use that data field, right? Or you can?
No, you can use the date for just the lookup purpose, but to
Okay.
store the value, you should be using date key.
Okay.
So here I'm going to change some values to see, here I'm just changing the date to show you different date formats. I'm not changing any of the other values. So let's just keep it like probably the product. So let's leave it like that, 2021, February, and this is, I'm going to say this is my 2020, okay. So now I'm going to insert this data, 5 rows, fact cells. Now, if you want to use this data, right? So right now we just inserted manually, right? If I had this select statement, I added. What if this was coming from a source file or something? You could do that as well differently. But I'm going to take that as part of the example that I'm going to go through. Okay. So here I'm going to write a query to show you how you can use the date dimension to pull some of the other attributes from there, right? So you can say, let's join this table with dim calendar day. Since we just created this table, it did not refresh the metadata yet. So I'm just manually going to, so this is dim calendar day, or you can say DD, and on FS dot, you have this date key equal to, you have those DD dot date key, right? So if I now run this query, it's going to give me those 5 rows, right? Now, what I can do is, now I have the flexibility to use lots of other attributes, right? So you can see, I don't have to query anything to show, the sale date that I had on that given time, what day of the week was that, right? So I can easily see that, okay, Monday, that was on Monday. I can see the, for example, if I go here, and what day of the month was that? What, it was 13th, right? And I can also look at, what quarter was that? It was second quarter, first quarter, third quarter, etc. Which year was that, right? Was that on a weekend? Was that our, if it was a weekday? So if you wanted to, if you did not have a date dimension attached to your fact table, you would have to calculate all those things manually. That means you have to write a query, use different date functions like, day of the month or DD or all those month and quarter, those functions available in system functions, you would have to use them. But since you have already a date dimension created, you have the flexibility to use that date dimension and retrieve all those relevant attributes. So that's where it becomes really useful. Now, you can also add lots of other attributes in your date dimension. For example, in the other table I was showing, I don't have any data in this table yet, but as you can see, it has lots of other attributes, right? You have full date USA, day of the month, day suffix, day name, and then it also track, a lot of other things like if holiday in UK, holiday in USA, and etc. So you can add more attributes you want based on the data warehouse design that your architect is going to do. It might be relevant, right? But for learning purpose, if you understand the concept, this is what you would like to do is the flexibility that you have by joining this date table, dim date table or calendar date table. Did that clear your concept, doubt?
Yes, completely. Thank you, Abdullah.
All right.
I have a question. So the only way that you can analyze the data is by joining the dimension with the fact table or whatever dimension you want to analyze during the date.
That's not the only way, but that's a more efficient way, I would
The more
say.
efficient
So,
way. Okay.
so if you had, if you did not have the date key, as I mentioned, you would have to write those manual query, right? You have to use those functions to be able to get those breakdown. So for example, if I wanted to get, let's say I want to get total sales based on each quarter and year, right? So I could say simply total sales, and then I could use from date table, I could use that. That is a, for example, I could use this. I wanted to see which day of the week is we have more sales, right? So you can say, for example, here in your date table, we have this column called day of the week, right? So day of the week name. So if I take this column and do a grouping, right? Day of the week name, which is Monday, Saturday, and all other days. And then I say, let's group by this total sale. And I want to see order by, sales amount. And I can say order by this first column. Now, if I run this, I can see, Sunday seems to be a good day for the store. Is they're having more sales or something. So if you look at the data, and even though we have only a few rows, so look at this this join query. Actually, I'm going to just have one more query and remove that calculation, just put a sum at the star. And then you will see actually Sunday you had 2 transactions in this table, right? So based on the calculation that you just a hypothetical example, you see Sunday is actually you have more sales compared to other days of the week. So this is again, this kind of analysis you could do if you have the date dimension properly built and linked together with your fact table. So you don't have to manually calculate, right? So if you wanted to manually calculate, then you would have to do a lot of stuff. For example, you use those date functions, and then you have to convert your date field into acceptable format to be able to find those calculations and everything. It's going to take you a little bit extra effort. All right, so now same thing is probably going to be relevant if we because somebody asked a question about the lookup transformation. Now think about, you're trying to populate this fact table, right? I'm going to truncate the fact table and reload, but I'm going to show this example. What if this data was coming from, from a source table or source file, right? How we do tie them back together to be able to, create that format. So also I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to, a little bit different way, as treating them as date format, and make it like how we can attach this with our fact table. Okay, so give me a moment here. Okay, so I'm going to open a package real quick. I had a solution open, so I'm just going to open a new package, create a new package. Second here. So, I mean, you don't have to do this in just integration service or SSIS. If there's any other ETL tool or anything is being used, you can also do in any of the other tools. But since we're talking about SSIS and lookup and everything, let's do it in here. Okay. So give me 1 second. It's opening my Visual Studio. It is testing the connectivity. Okay. All right. So here it is. Okay. So I'm going to rename this package to load fact sales table. All right. Now, also what I'm going to do here is truncate this sales table. Truncate this. Now, this time I have this challenge, right? So challenge is, if you look at the data that I'm trying to store in the table, it has this date format, right? So, but I can only relate this data with my fact table, and the dimension and the date dimension table is only in integer format, right? So that means it has to be in, for example, in this format, date key in this format. That way I can only do a primary key foreign key relationship, right? So that's where we can use something called lookup transformation. So what is this lookup transformation? Let me bring a data flow task. So what is data flow task? So data flow task is nothing but it's a task and control flow which will let you connect to a source system and a target system. And also in between, you will have those flexibility to add transformations in your data. So the transformations are basically when you want to modify or you want to make some changes within the data. The example could be, let's say you have first name and last name, right? You had to separate them in your data inside a data flow task. You can do it many different ways, but those are like transformations. If you are calculating certain values by using some of the transformations that you have, aggregate functions, or you have derived column and all these. So those are the things as considered as transformations in your data. So you're changing your data, actual data that is coming from the source before you can load into the table. So now if I go inside the task, data flow task, I have a source that I can connect, and I have to have a destination that I can connect. So for this specific source, I'm going to say, this is my OLEDB source, and I have to create a quick connection to the database. So let's give it a second here. So I'm going to create a new connection and click OK. Looks like it already had connection created. And then I'm going to use that SQL command as my source instead of the table or view. Okay. And then I'm going to take this data that I generated over here in select statement. Okay. So I'm going to actually, I have to say a few things here, actually modify that, because everything is no column, right? So it says, if I run this, it doesn't have any alias. So I can provide an alias, or I can just keep track of the information when I'm going to load. So I can just say, sequential, like, this is my product key, or I can actually just quickly change that alias by providing them. So it's going to take a second, but give me a second here. This is going to be sales date. All right, so we're going to keep that option. And then instead of date key, now I'm saying this is my sales date. And we'll see how we can tie it back together. Okay, so total sales, total inventory, and then you have quantity sold. Date key. Okay. All right. So also in the table, I'm going to do a quick adjustment here. I'm going to also say this is my, instead of date key, I'm going to say this is my sales date key. Okay. So I'm going to drop and recreate this table as well. And in valid reference, this is date key. Oh, okay. I think I had the drop and create table in other window, but this should be into there. Okay. All right, so let's move on here. So I'm going to do the same. Actually here, I have to provide the column name. So let's see if I run this way. Okay, yeah, this should be fine. I don't have to provide column names in each of the union statements. So I'm going to copy this over, go back to the package. So this is going to be my, if I click on preview, I can see the data. Okay, so this is my data that I would like to load into the fact table. Now clicking OK. Now coming to the next thing that I need is, how do I find the date key from the date dimension table by getting this data, which I do not have a key, but I have sales date, right? How do we get that? So now what we can do is actually, let's click OK, go back here, and I'm just going to quickly check. Okay, so what we can do is we can do a lookup, right? So lookup to the date key table, dim date table or date dimension table, and then we can get the relevant key from that table. So here, lookup transformation. So that should be under your common transformations, it's commonly used. So what does it do? So lookup transformation is a transformation that lets you look up into another table or another object. So that means if you are trying to see if certain record exists in a table, you can use lookup transformation to see if the data is available in that table or not. And then you can also see if the data is matching or not from the source to target. And based on the matching and not matching, you can do either update or insert. That's one of the use cases. The other use cases is that what we're going to do right now is to look up into the date table, and we're going to retrieve the date key from the table. Okay, now if you go inside, you can find some definition. So this transformation enables you the performance of simple equi-joins between the input and reference data set. Again, this is some just the definition from the system itself. But if you look at these different tabs that you have, general,
so,
right?
Sorry, Abdullah, what is the input and what is the reference data set here in our case?
So in this case, the input is going to be your OLEDB source that is coming from the top, right? If you click on preview, this is the input. And then the reference is going to be, in this case, we did not create the connection yet, but the reference is going to be your dim calendar day, because that's the table you're going to cross check. Okay, so let's create the connection. So I'm going to go here and use the connection. Right here, you can see dim calendar day. And now if you click on the columns, and then you can find the available input and available lookup. right? So available input is nothing but coming from your source. The available lookup is the table that you created connection as a reference. Now, what you can use is this total sales, and the date is pretty much same kind of format which you can use to do a lookup. So let's say I have this date from the date dimension table, and then I have this sales date, and it says cannot map the input column sales date to the lookup column date because the data type do not match. That's a very common scenario. So you have to find out why. Okay. So let's click on OK, cancel this. And now how do you find out, right? So let's go back, check the table first. So I can see the date is a date data type in the table, in the calendar date table. But here I don't see the option to check, right? So how do I say, what can I say this is the data type? Most probably this is treating them as worker because you're putting them inside a single code. So what the other option you have is you can check the metadata. Okay, so if you click on this blue line, so click on that, double click on the metadata, and you will see the sales date is actually a string, str. So what you can do is you can actually convert this into a date by using a data conversion transformation, or you can also use derived column transformation. It's up to you. So I can use, I'll show you both. Okay, so let's look at the derived column, different way of doing. All right, so I'm going to connect this, and here you'll see column, and you have sales date, and then in the right hand side you will see that something called typecast, and then you have to find out the relevant the type. So I think it's going to be db date, something like that. So I can pull this over here, and looks like, yeah, database date. Now here in derived column, I can say replace my sales date, and that should do it. So I'm going to click OK, and then join is back together again, and go to the same spot where I created the connection, which is going to be your dim calendar day. Column is going to be your date and sales date. Again, it's complaining about the data type. All right, so let's try to see why is that. So let's click OK, go back here, and now I'm going to click in this place to see the metadata. They're still pointing to str. So let's go back here. I think what we have to do is, yeah, see right here, it's still pointing to str. So what we can do actually, let's try to, because it has to validate during the runtime. So what you can do is, let's try to use the data conversion transformation first and see. So here I'm going to use that sales date, change the type to date, and I'm going to use that as alias can be sales date underscore date format, something like that. Whatever, you can give any name, it's up to you. So I'm going to click OK, connect it back again, go to the lookup transformation, go to the connection, calendar, go to the column, date, and now you have this new column added in the at the bottom where you can join this, right? So here, because the data type did not match, again is complaining. Okay,
so we cannot modify the column data type in the SSMS.
We can convert that, but I'm trying to figure out why it's not working in here. Okay, so it's still pointing this to, I can see this is DT date. Okay, so that should be okay, but I don't know why it's complaining. So let me check back to the SQL Server Management Studio here.
Yeah, check the source.
So here you can check your data looks like this format. And you could also convert in here. You can use a cast and convert in SSMS if you want, but let's try to figure out why it's not working. Okay, so coming back to this and metadata, it says DT date, which should be okay. And I'm going to here connection column. Let's try one more time. Cells date format to the lookup because data type did not match. So I'm going to do one more thing real quick. Okay, instead of using the table or view, I can use this result from SQL query. Okay, so let's go over here and let's use this format. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure we're not missing anything. In this date, I'm going to cast this again as date to see if it's causing any issues. Okay, as date. So now I'm going to take this as my source query in the lookup transformation and try to do the same thing with mapping again. And still it's complaining. So now let's go back to the conversion, data conversion, and try to see if any other data type we can select. Okay, so DB database time, this is date, should be okay. So I am, if this doesn't work, so the next option I have is here, actually use that conversion. So what I'm guessing is probably we did not provide the column name in each of the fields. It's probably treating them differently. So I'm going to actually quickly add these field names here. Check if that is if that's the funny thing going on here. Okay, for testing purpose, I'm just going to take two columns, two rows, and see if that's anything to do with that. Okay, so here I'm now going back to the one more thing I just want to do is make this go to properties, make this to the delay validation to true, just to make sure it's not validating something on the fly. All right, so go back here, columns. Yeah. Okay, same problem. So let's try to do.
What about if you mark date key to date format to cell phone?
Say again.
How about if you mark the date key? What's the data type?
Date key is an integer.
Maybe it takes integers. I don't know. The format.
So I'm going to cast these as date. So this is what I'm going to quickly change. So that way it should be here, here, and let's do this. Okay, this. All right, so let's take this again and we'll fix it. So these are the things that you will have to take step by step. And let's see, columns, everything looks good. Click OK here. This is your sales date. Okay. Now I don't think you need the data conversion. Okay, I'm going to remove that data conversion because we already converted that in the SQL query. So let's try to, actually, I want to just quickly verify this metadata. So here you can see something is wrong with this query, right? So I'm going to.
Abdullah, I think the previous two rows were not deleted. They are still there, I think.
Should be okay because I copied everything. So let's do one more thing. Actually, let's keep this format. And what I also want to do is I want to wrap this up with one more like a subquery type, okay? And then do something like that. That way it does not treat them anything separately. So let me take this. I'm just experimenting different thing, and that's how you do usually. All right, so now I see the date is slightly different. Sales date is coming as you can see, is a date time. Okay, so now if I click OK and just try to connect with lookup, and I'm going to see metadata is still treating them as str. So we'll do something to do work around here. So let's do the last item I want to do. Actually, I want to do create actually a table and store this data. Select star into, and I'm going to say staging underscore fact sets. Okay, so that's going to select star into, is the syntax is correct? Okay, let's do this. Select star into staging table. See why it's okay. So 5 rows. Well, so even though it's complaining about that, but actually it took the data. So I'm going to say this is my staging underscore fact sales table. All right, so let's insert the data. So I created a hypothetical staging table. Okay, select star from, if I now go back to refresh database, and if I go to the table, I should see staging underscore right here, fact sales. Okay, so I'm going to see the data. So this is something I loaded. Now I'm going to see what was the data type selected. It's a date data type that is expected in this case. So I'm going to actually now go back, and in the OLDB source, I'm going to use table or view and pick that table. Or I can also use SQL command, and here I can use that select star. Okay, so now I'm going to click columns. Okay, now let's try to do the lookup. And now I have to create that connection first because last time, and also I'm going to do redirect rows to no match output while I'm here. And now it's going to be my calendar day again. Column is going to be my date column that I'm trying to do a lookup, and the field should be references sales date. Again, it's complaining. So something to do with this package. So what I'm going to do actually, I'm going to close.
Can you check the cell date on the dim data? Do you think there's a problem there?
The calendar days seem to be okay because this is here, if I look back, in this table, let's refresh this. And here I can see it is a date data type, right? So this date data type should be matching with my this date, right? It's the same data type. Now, next item I'm going to, so actually I'm going to close my solution and I'm going to actually open a new solution and see if something with the Visual Studio corrupted or something. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to open a new solution just for testing purpose. And yeah, we're almost there. Just give me a second. So you open, I'm going to just create a new solution, create new package. And I'm going to probably just do it keep in my desktop for now. Create new folder. Select folder, date. Sorry. All right, date, dimension, lookup. All right, so I'm going to click OK. New solution is getting created. And I'll do the same thing real quick. Not now, I don't need Azure Data Factory. Okay, so this is ready to go. I'm going to go to the data flow task one more time. And go inside, pull that OLEDB source real quick. OLEDB source. I'm going to use the connection to the staging table that we just created. New connection. And I'm going to actually create a new connection from beginning. Server name. And the database name, this. Test connection, okay, okay. Clicking okay. The table or view name is going to be my staging fact cells. Click on preview. I can see the data, click OK. All right, so now next thing is your lookup transformation, right? So let's look at here. I'm going to connect back. Now let's try to see the metadata first. Now I can see, so something was wrong with my solution that was opened, it was corrupted. So you might see something like that, which doesn't have any explanation why it's happening. So you just have to do this kind of workaround. So now I'm going to go to the lookup and go to the column connection, and I can pick that date, dim calendar day. Column is going to be the date here, which will intersect with sales date, and there is no complaint. Now I'm going to, so here's the thing, what we're trying to do, right? So if you go to the connection, what we're trying to do is we're trying to retrieve these keys from the full date format. That's why we're doing a lookup with the date column, and then we're going to get the date key from the lookup matched values. So that's what we're trying to do. Now in the column, that's what I said, I want the date key to be my output, lookup columns to go to the output. Click OK. Now if I bring my destination here, which is going to be my fact, so this is going to be match, and then this is going to be my fact sales table here that we created. and we're going to go to the mapping. Now, product key, customer key, location key, sales date key, right? So this is where you want to use the date key as column. You don't want that sales date anymore because you are already doing a lookup with the sales date to get the date key from your dim calendar date, right? You understand that? So now we're going to use the date key to bring that data over so that you can load into your fact table. So I'm going to click OK. That should be good. Let's save it. And now I'm going to quickly check if we have any data in this table. Should not be anything in there. So I'm going to just save and run this. So it might take a few seconds to run because first time you're running package, it has to validate every dependencies. So here 5 rows they were imported in the table. If I run this, now I can see. So let's try to run this staging table. And the fact table together, just to show the difference, right? So here I'm going to run both of them together, and you will see in your staging table, you have these cells in this format, which is year, month, and date in the date format. And then in the sales date key, you took the exact date, because now you can use this join. You can use this right here, the join that we did. Now instead of sales here, you can simply use that sales date key, which can be joined with the date key in your dimension table, and you would be able to pull the same data. Make sense? Clear?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Abdullah.
All right, so that's what we tried to do. And then we saw some challenges. You have to take one step at a time, right? This is very common. You see this kind of issues. And a lot of these issues doesn't have any explanation, right? For example, you see, I just restarted my Visual Studio and then it worked because we could not find any possible issues or mistake from our end, right? So that's how when you find this kind of roadblocks, you just have to take some wild guess, like restarting your laptop, restarting the solution, or creating the new solution, stuff like that.
Yeah, I tried to watch a lot of videos. I couldn't stop them and ask them how they're doing it. So that's why I take this advantage.
Sure, cool. All right, so does anybody need any of these queries that we have written in the class today? It's just a simple query, so okay, so I'll ignore that. Does anybody need this simple package? Yes, okay, so just wait for a little bit. I will post them in Colaberry chat. All right. Okay, so again, we don't have time. We're already 8 minutes over. So the topic that I intended to cover, we'll keep it for the next session and we'll cover next time, okay? So again, thank you for joining tonight.